My name is Hannah, and I was 32 years old when my entire world collapsed with a single phone call. It happened on an ordinary workday inside a bright conference room filled with the low hum of colleagues chatting. My phone lit up with Tyler's name. I thought it would be routine, maybe a question about dinner or a casual "when are you home?" Instead, when I stepped into the hallway and pressed answer, his voice cut through the air like a knife. "I'm divorcing you, and I already sold the apartment." The words didn't just hit me, they hollowed me out. He didn't pause, didn't tremble, didn't show a trace of remorse. He laughed. He actually laughed as if destroying our life together was nothing more than the punchline to a cruel joke. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The sterile hallway spun, my grip tightened around the phone, and the air felt heavy against my chest. I tried to steady myself. "You sold the apartment." My voice was calm, too calm. "Yeah," he said smugly. "Nicole and I need the money to start our life together. She deserves better than that tiny place anyway." Nicole. The name seared into me like fire. Months of suspicion rushed back the late nights, the mysterious business trips, the distance he had carefully stitched between us. My gut had whispered betrayal, but hearing her name confirmed what my heart had tried to deny. And in that second rage surged where sorrow should have been. I wanted to scream, to demand why. But another part of me, the deeper, stronger part, knew the worst thing I could do was give him satisfaction. So I swallowed my anger, and with a voice colder than I had ever heard myself use, I said, "Sounds good." He chuckled again, believing I was broken, believing he had won. Inside my chest burned, but outwardly I gave him nothing. That phone call lasted less than 3 minutes, yet it tore apart 6 years of marriage. 6 years I thought were built on trust. 6 years of shared dreams, of late-night takeout dinners in our cozy 2-bedroom, of whispered plans about the future. It turned out I was married to a stranger. As I stood alone in that hallway, the conference room buzzing just a few feet away, I realized that betrayal doesn't always come with screaming or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes wrapped in laughter. Sometimes the person you trusted most becomes the villain in your story. I didn't cry that day, not in the hallway, not even on the plane ride home later that week. I didn't give Tyler the privilege of imagining me shattered. Instead, I made a choice in that instant. If he wanted war, I would give him war. But on my terms, quiet, strategic, devastating. Because the truth, he thought he had destroyed me. But Tyler had no idea what was coming next. Before I go deeper, I want to pause and ask something from you. Stories like mine are more common than you think. Stories of betrayal, of people discovering their strength in the most unexpected ways. If you've ever faced something that forced you to rise stronger, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if you want more real stories like this, make sure to subscribe. It helps me keep sharing them. Now let me take you back to the beginning of how my marriage turned from a promise into a weapon against me, and how that phone call wasn't the end, but the spark that ignited everything. I walked back into the conference room after that call, my face calm, though my heart still pounded in my chest. No one noticed. They kept laughing, shuffling papers, sipping their coffee, while my marriage had just ended in a hallway. I sat down, nodded at the right moments, even added a note or two during the meeting. But inside, a storm was raging. Nicole. That single name replayed in my head like a cruel echo. Tyler hadn't just ended our marriage. He had announced another woman was already living in the place that used to be mine. He didn't whisper her name in shame. He said it with pride, as if I was the intruder in their love story. 6 years together wiped away in less than 3 minutes. I remembered the first time I met Tyler. He had that easy charm, the kind that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. Back then, I was 26, full of hope, and ready to build a future with someone. Tyler seemed safe, steady, the kind of man who knew where he was going. I thought I was lucky. I thought we were a team, but now I could see all the little red flags I had ignored. The late nights at the office that never quite added up. The way he brushed me off when I asked about money. The dismissive smile, the "don't worry, I've got it handled," followed by a quick kiss to shut down my questions. I used to think that was confidence. I realize now it was arrogance, the arrogance of a man who thought I'd never question him. And worst of all, I let him believe it. That thought burned, but with the burn came clarity. Tyler thought I was powerless. He thought he could laugh at me, strip away my home, and walk into the sunset with Nicole. But he didn't know the truth. The deed to our apartment was in my name, mine alone. Months earlier, when we refinanced, I had insisted on the transfer. He signed without reading the papers, too busy chasing whatever illusion of power he thought he had. He didn't even ask questions, just scrawled his name at the bottom of the page. That moment, forgotten to him, had become my shield. Tyler believed he had destroyed me, but he was standing on quicksand, and I was the only one who knew it. That night, I sat alone in my hotel room, staring out at the city lights. The betrayal hurt, yes. But under the hurt was resolve, a cold, steady determination that replaced every ounce of grief. I wasn't going to beg for answers. I wasn't going to cry into the phone. I was going to fight back, and I was going to win. My first call wasn't to my mother or a friend. It was to Chloe, my lawyer, and one of the only people I trusted completely. I laid it all out, every detail of the call, the apartment, Nicole. Wait, he told you he sold the apartment? Chloe's voice was sharp, incredulous. Yes. There was a pause, then a laugh, the dry kind that carried both disbelief and satisfaction. He can't do that, Hannah. He doesn't own it. The sale is invalid. If he's already taken money, that's fraud. Fraud. The word snapped like a whip in the silence of my room. I whispered it back to her, almost savoring it. Fraud. Exactly, Chloe said. We'll notify the buyer immediately. Then we'll send Tyler a letter spelling out what happens if he doesn't back off. I felt my lips curve into the first real smile I'd had all day. Tyler thought he'd stripped me bare. Instead, he had set himself up for humiliation. I put down the phone, sat back on the bed, and let the calm wash over me. For the first time since that call, I could breathe again. This wasn't just about a divorce anymore. This was about reclaiming my life. Ari. Before I move forward, let me tell you something. Moments like these, when someone tries to break you down, are the moments that define who you really are. If you've ever been in a situation where someone underestimated your strength, share it below. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because the best part is still to come. I knew Tyler's smug laughter would not last long, and when he realized the truth, his downfall would be spectacular. The morning after that call, I stared at my reflection in the hotel mirror. My eyes looked the same, but I felt like a stranger had taken my place. 6 years of marriage had ended, and my husband was already planning his life with Nicole. The betrayal was sharp, but even sharper was the realization that I had ignored so many signs. Tyler had never truly valued me. I saw it now. The little dismissals, the way he downplayed my career as cute, the way he acted like money decisions were his territory. And I let it slide, telling myself that compromise was part of love. But compromise had turned into silence, and silence had turned into submission. I remembered the first time he brushed off a serious concern. It was 3 years ago when I asked about our savings. He laughed, kissed me, and said, "Don't worry, babe. I've got everything under control." I wanted to believe him, so I did. That became the pattern, my voice getting smaller, his shadow getting bigger. Now the price of ignoring those patterns stood before me. A man who felt confident enough to call from miles away, laugh in my ear, and tell me my home was gone. But he was wrong. I pulled out my laptop and reviewed the refinance paperwork, the one moment that changed everything. My name in bold print on the deed. His signature below careless, rushed. Proof of his arrogance. Proof of my survival. When Chloe confirmed what I already knew, my spine straightened. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't just a victim. I was holding the winning card, and Tyler didn't even know the game had started. Still, there was pain. I'd be lying if I said otherwise. I remembered the nights we stayed up talking about the future, whispering about kids and vacations we never took. I remembered the way I once trusted him with every dream I had. Those memories hurt because they were real. But they also fueled me, reminding me what I deserved and what I would never accept again. I wanted to scream into the night to ask how he could throw it all away, but I didn't. Instead, I made coffee, sat down, and began to plan. Quiet strength was my weapon now. The calls from Tyler started coming the next day. Not the bold, arrogant tone he used before. These were shorter, more jagged. He wanted answers. Why hadn't I reacted? Why was I so calm I didn't answer? Let him stew. Let him choke on his own confidence. By the third voicemail, his tone had shifted again. "Hannah, call me back. We can work this out." The hypocrisy was almost laughable. He wanted to work it out only when he realized I wasn't chasing him, wasn't begging to know why. And that was when I truly saw him, not the charming man I married, but the manipulator who fed on my silence. I wasn't silent anymore. But, it's strange how clear things look once the fog lifts. Sometimes the very moment you think you're breaking is the moment you're finally free. Tell me in the comments, have you ever looked back and realized the signs were there all along? If this story feels familiar, don't forget to subscribe. Sharing stories like this is how we remind each other that no one has to stay powerless. As I closed my laptop that night, one thought steadied me. Tyler believed he had taken everything, but in truth, he had given me the gift of clarity, and clarity is power. The days ahead would not be easy, but they would be mine. When my plane touched down back home, the air felt heavier than usual, thick with the weight of everything I had to face. Yet underneath the heaviness was a quiet current of confidence. Tyler thought he had stripped me of everything, but I carried a secret he hadn't even bothered to notice. The apartment was mine, legally, completely, and beyond dispute. Months earlier, we refinanced, and I had asked for the deed to be transferred solely into my name. Tyler, in his usual rush, signed the papers without reading a single line. He believed his charm was enough to keep me blind forever. That arrogance had always been his weakness, and now it was my greatest strength. As the taxi rolled through the city streets, I looked out the window and remembered the first day I walked into that apartment. The walls were bare, but my heart was full. It wasn't just square footage, it was a symbol of the life we promised to build. I chose every color on the walls, every piece of furniture. And Tyler wanted to erase all of it with one phone call and a laugh. Not anymore. I dropped my bags at home and immediately called Chloe. Her voice was brisk, steady, the kind of tone that reminded me I wasn't alone in this fight. "We already notified the buyer," she told me. "They're furious. Tyler promised them something he never had the right to sell. They're willing to cooperate. It strengthens your case." The word fraud echoed again. It tasted almost sweet. For once, Tyler's recklessness was not my burden to carry, it was his own trap closing in on him. That night, I pulled the file out of the drawer and stared at the deed. My name. Bold, undeniable, and final. I held it up like a shield, whispering to myself, "He cannot take this away." I knew Tyler. He would come storming in, full of rage, expecting me to crumble under his voice. He had done it for years, silencing me with volume, with disdain, with that smug grin. But this time would be different. This time I was ready. I practiced the words I would say steady and calm. Not shouting, not begging, just truth. Truth was enough to destroy him now. The following evening I didn't have to wait long. The front door burst open, and there he was, red-faced, waving his phone, clutching the letter Chloe had sent. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. His voice ricocheted off the walls that no longer belonged to him. "You're telling me I can't sell the apartment. It's half mine." I crossed my arms, grounding myself in every ounce of calm I could muster. "No, Tyler, it's not. The deed has been in my name for months. You signed off on it." For the first time in years, I watched him freeze. Confusion rippled across his face, then rage, then disbelief. "You're lying." Without a word, I pulled the paper from the folder and held it up. "Here it is, in black and white. You didn't read as usual, you signed as usual, and now you have nothing." His bravado cracked for the briefest second, his eyes darting to the paper before he masked it with a sneer. "You think you're so smart? This doesn't change anything." But it did. It changed everything. I took a step closer, my voice low and unwavering. "The sale is void. The buyer knows it. And if you touched a single cent of that deposit, you're in even deeper trouble." His mouth opened, then closed. He paced, running his hand through his hair, muttering excuses that even he didn't believe. I stayed silent, letting the weight of the truth crush him. For once, silence was mine, not his, and it was powerful. Sometimes victory isn't about shouting louder. It's about standing still, holding your ground, and letting the truth speak for itself. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a moment where staying calm gave you more power than fighting back? And if you're finding strength in this story, subscribe to stay with me. There's more ahead, and you won't want to miss it. Tyler stormed off that night, but I knew this was only the beginning. His downfall had started, and there was no turning back. The apartment was quiet after Tyler stormed out, but the silence didn't bring me peace. It was the silence of a battlefield after the first strike. I knew he would be back angrier, louder, more desperate. That was always his pattern. He thrived on control, on making me question myself, on making me feel small. But the tide had shifted. For once, I wasn't scared of his return. I was ready. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and Chloe on the phone. Her tone was brisk, sharp as steel. We've closed the loop with the buyer. They know the sale is invalid. They're furious at Tyler for wasting their time, but their cooperation gives us leverage. If he tries anything else, we'll escalate. The word escalate rolled through my mind like thunder. For years, Tyler escalated arguments to shut me down. Now escalation was in my corner. Good, I told her, my voice steady. Let him realize he's not untouchable anymore. That day at work, I moved through meetings like a shadow. People smiled, made small talk, asked about deadlines. None of them knew that a war was raging just outside my calm exterior. I nodded, contributed ideas, and smiled when expected. But under the surface, I was coiling tighter and tighter, waiting for Tyler's next move. And it came faster than I expected. By evening, my phone lit up with voicemail after voicemail. His voice crackled through the speaker, shifting tones like a bad actor fumbling through roles. One was angry, full of curses and threats. The next was soft, pleading, almost tearful. "Hannah, we can fix this. Don't do this." I didn't respond. I let every word hang in the air unanswered. Each silence was a reminder that I wasn't the same woman he used to manipulate. That night, Lauren, my closest friend, came over. She walked in with a bag of takeout and a bottle of wine, her eyes scanning the room. "How are you holding up?" she asked, setting the food down on the counter. "I'm fine," I said, surprising myself with how true it sounded. Better than I thought I'd be. We sat on the couch unpacking cartons of noodles and spring rolls, the city lights flickering outside the window. I told her about the call, about Nicole, about Tyler's arrogance. She shook her head, a smirk tugging at her lips. Classic. He always thought he was the smartest man in the room. Guess what? He wasn't. We laughed, and for a moment the heaviness lifted. Sharing the story out loud gave me power. It turned betrayal into strategy, pain into clarity. But when the laughter faded, a quieter thought settled in. I had wasted years believing in a man who never valued me. And now I had the chance to value myself again. I looked around the apartment. His jackets draped carelessly on a chair, his shoes tossed by the door, his clutter clogging the spaces I once loved. It was still full of him, still heavy with his presence. That would have to change. The next morning I started boxing his things. Each tie, each shirt, each framed jersey felt like lifting a stone from my chest. By the time I stacked the boxes in the corner, the apartment already felt lighter. Tyler called again that afternoon, his voice harsher, more desperate. "You can't do this, Hannah. This place is ours. You can't just push me out." But he was wrong. The apartment wasn't ours anymore. It was mine. And soon he would understand exactly what that meant. When someone tries to take everything from you, the hardest but most powerful thing you can do is take back control. If you've ever had to reclaim something that was rightfully yours, your home, your career, even your peace of mind, tell me about it in the comments. And if this story resonates, subscribe to stay with me. We're only halfway through, and the best parts are still coming. Tyler thought he was still in the game. What he didn't know was that the game had already ended and he had lost. The following days unfolded like a chess match, every move calculated, every silence deliberate. Tyler called constantly, and each time I let the phone ring. His messages piled up in my inbox, angry, pleading, threatening, pathetic. He swung between roles as if trying to find the version of himself that would still control me. But the truth was simple. None of them worked anymore. Chloe called me one afternoon, her voice clipped and professional. The buyer has officially rescinded the agreement, she said. They're furious with Tyler for wasting their time. They'll cooperate if we need them to testify. This strengthens your hand. I smiled, the first genuine smile in days. Perfect. Tyler believed he was building a new life with Nicole, but instead he had built a case against himself. He thought he could outsmart me, but every signature he scribbled without thought, every document he ignored was now tightening the rope around him. That evening, I sat in the apartment alone, staring at the boxes of his belongings stacked neatly in the corner. Each box was a reminder of what I was removing, not just physical clutter, but years of weight pressing down on me. I thought about the Hannah who once apologized for taking up too much space in her own home, the Hannah who bit her tongue when Tyler dismissed her opinions. That woman was gone. The door flew open just as I set down my teacup. Tyler barged in, his face flushed, his hands shaking with rage. He slammed Chloe's letter down on the table. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice cracking the air. "You're making me look like a fool." I rose slowly, keeping my voice steady. "You did that yourself, Tyler." His eyes flared, and for a moment I saw the man I had once trusted only now. He looked smaller, cornered, desperate. "We've been together 6 years, he said, his tone shifting to almost a plea. "You can't just erase that." I took a step closer, holding his gaze. "You erased it the moment you called me and laughed about throwing me out of my own home." For the first time, his confidence faltered. His shoulders slumped, his words stumbled. "Nicole and we just needed a fresh start." "Then start somewhere else," I snapped, my voice like steel. "Because this place isn't yours. Not anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. He stared at me, jaw clenched, but he had no counter, no weapon left. The truth was on paper, black and white. His manipulation, his charm, his arrogance, they were powerless against it. He finally turned away, pacing like a trapped animal. "You'll regret this," he muttered. But deep down he already knew it wasn't me who would regret anything. Later that night, Lauren came over again. We ordered pizza, spread out the boxes of his things, and packed the rest together. "He really thought he could just erase you," she said, shaking her head. "But look at you now." I glanced around the room. It still felt heavy, but less so. Each piece of him that disappeared made space for me to breathe again. "I won't let him take anything else," I said quietly. Lauren lifted her glass. "To reclaiming your life." I raised mine to meet hers, to never letting anyone laugh at me again. Sometimes taking back control isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet, deliberate, and unshakable. Have you ever had to stand your ground when someone thought they owned your story? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to see how this unfolds, subscribe now. Tyler hasn't faced the worst yet, and trust me, it's coming. The battle wasn't over, but the board was mine, and for the first time in years, I was playing to win. The next confrontation came sooner than I expected. I was sitting at the dining table, sorting through bills, when the door slammed open. Tyler marched in, eyes blazing, phone clenched in his fist. His anger filled the room before his voice did. "What is this nonsense?" he barked, waving Chloe's letter. "You're telling me I can't sell the apartment? That's insane. It's half mine." I didn't flinch. Not this time. I pushed the papers aside and looked straight at him. "It's not half yours, Tyler. It hasn't been for months. The deed is in my name, only mine. You signed it without even reading the paperwork." He froze. For just a heartbeat, the mask slipped. Confusion flickered across his face, followed by rage. "You're lying." I stood, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out the folder I had set aside for this very moment. I opened it, held up the deed, and let the silence stretch. Here it is, black and white. My name. Your signature at the bottom. You didn't bother to read like always. His lips curled into a sneer, the kind he used when he felt cornered. "You think you're clever, Hannah. This doesn't change anything. I already made a deal." I stepped closer, lowering my voice but keeping it sharp. "The sale is void. The buyer knows it. And if you touch the deposit, you've committed fraud. That means real charges, Tyler. Courtrooms, lawyers, headlines." His bravado faltered. For the first time, his eyes darted to the side. He paced the room like a trapped animal, muttering, "This is ridiculous. You're blowing things out of proportion." "No," I said firmly. "What's ridiculous is believing you could sell something you didn't own. What's ridiculous is laughing in my face, thinking I'd roll over and let you walk away with everything we built. Not anymore." He slammed his hand against the wall, trying to intimidate me. The sound echoed through the apartment, but I didn't move. The fear he once thrived on was gone. "You can't just kick me out," he shouted. I crossed my arms. "Actually, I can. But for now, you can stay here until you figure out your next move. Consider it a courtesy, one I don't owe you." His mouth opened, but no words came. He stormed down the hall, muttering curses under his breath. When the door finally shut behind him, I let out the breath I'd been holding. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of victory. For once, I hadn't just survived his outburst, I had stood taller, stronger. Later that night, as I replayed the confrontation in my mind, I realized something powerful. Tyler had always believed that raising his voice would silence mine, but tonight proved the truth. His shouting meant nothing against my calm. My strength wasn't in volume, it was in certainty. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is not yelling louder, but refusing to be shaken. Have you ever had someone try to intimidate you, only for you to discover the power of standing calm? Share it below. And if you want to follow the unraveling of Tyler's downfall, don't forget to subscribe. This storm is only beginning. I knew Tyler wouldn't stop here. Men like him never do. He would come back with more schemes, more attempts to break me down. But the difference now was simple. I wasn't breakable anymore. The next few days were a blur of voicemails and slammed doors. Tyler tried every tactic he knew. Anger, guilt, charm. But each attempt fell flat against the wall I had built. He came home one evening, his face twisted with frustration, and started in on me the second he crossed the threshold. "You're being unreasonable, Hannah. This is our apartment, our life. You can't just cut me out." I stood by the kitchen counter, arms folded, voice steady. "This is my apartment, Tyler. Legally. You gave that up the moment you signed the papers you didn't bother to read." He threw his jacket onto the chair, pacing like a caged animal. "You've always done this, turning little things into drama. You're making me out to be the villain." I didn't rise to the bait. I'd learned long ago that was his game, twisting the narrative, painting himself as the victim, while I was made to feel guilty for standing my ground. Not anymore. "You sold something that wasn't yours," I replied calmly. "That's not drama, that's fraud." The word hit him like a slap. He paused mid-stride, glared at me, then barked, "Fraud? Don't be ridiculous. No one's going to believe that." "They already do," I said. "The buyer knows. My lawyer knows. And soon the courts will too if you keep pushing." For a long moment he just stared at me, the silence thick with disbelief. Then, with a scoff, he muttered, "You think you're clever, but you can't survive without me. You need me." That was the last straw. I took a slow step forward, my voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "No, Tyler, I don't need you. I never did. You needed me, my stability, my trust, my silence. But you lost all of that the second you laughed about throwing me out." His mouth opened, but no sound came. He looked smaller, somehow deflated. Still dangerous, but no longer untouchable. Later that night, when he finally left again, I sat on the couch with the lights off, staring into the quiet. The apartment felt different, lighter, stronger. For years it had been a space where I felt small, where his voice dominated every corner. But now it was shifting. It was mine again, piece by piece. Lauren dropped by the next day, a bag of groceries in her arms. She glanced at the neatly stacked boxes of his belongings and smirked. "So he's really losing it, huh?" "Completely," I said, pouring us both glasses of iced tea. She raised her glass like a toast. "Good, let him stew. He deserves every second of it." I smiled, a flicker of gratitude warming my chest. For so long I had carried the weight of his arrogance alone. Now I had allies. Friends who saw me, who reminded me I wasn't crazy for standing my ground. And with every passing day, I felt stronger. Here's the thing about people like Tyler. They thrive when you doubt yourself. They crumble when you don't. Have you ever had someone try to convince you that you were the problem, only to realize later that it was all their manipulation? Share your story in the comments. And if you want to follow the rest of this journey, subscribe now, because the turning point is closer than ever. Tyler believed he still had control. He didn't realize that control had slipped through his fingers the moment I stopped listening. The days blurred into a rhythm of calculated silence. Tyler would storm in shouting, then leave in frustration when he realized his voice no longer cracked my resolve. He called nonstop his words, flipping from rage to pleading. Each voicemail was a performance, but I refused to be his audience. Then one night Chloe called. Her voice was crisp, laced with quiet triumph. The buyer is officially on our side. They've rescinded the agreement and documented Tyler's actions. If he keeps pushing, we have grounds for court. I leaned back in my chair, letting the words settle over me like armor. Tyler thought he had orchestrated a victory. Instead, he had orchestrated his own collapse. When he showed up the next evening, his fury was volcanic. He slammed the door, his eyes bloodshot. "You think you've won, Hannah. You're ruining everything Nicole and I had plans. You're destroying them." I didn't rise, didn't shout. I stood calmly, arms folded. "You destroyed them yourself. The moment you tried to sell something you didn't own." His chest heaved, his fists clenched. "You'll regret this. You can't fight me forever." But here's the thing, he didn't understand that regret was already his, not mine. I stayed calm, my words measured. The buyer knows the truth. Chloe has everything documented. If you spent even a cent of that deposit, you're not just reckless, you're criminal. His face shifted from rage to panic in seconds. He turned away, muttering excuses, trying to regain his footing, but the balance had already tipped. That night after he left, I sat in the quiet apartment. The walls seemed to breathe differently, now lighter somehow. It wasn't just a space anymore, it was a battleground I had claimed. Tyler's voice no longer owned the air between these walls. Mine did. And yet even as relief coursed through me, I knew this wasn't over. Men like Tyler never walk away easily. There would be another storm, another desperate attempt to claw back control. But I was ready. Life has a strange way of testing us. Sometimes the people we love become the very storms we have to survive. Have you ever faced a moment where you realized the storm wasn't there to destroy you, but to reveal your strength? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to see what happens when Tyler pushes past his breaking point, subscribe. Now you'll want to stay for the next part. Tyler believed he still had power. He didn't see that power had already slipped away, and the cracks in his world were widening by the second. The real explosion was still coming. It happened on a Saturday evening. I was at the dining table reviewing paperwork Chloe had sent me when the door opened. Tyler walked in smug, confident, as if nothing had changed. But he wasn't alone. Nicole was with him. Her arm looped through his, her eyes scanning the apartment with a smirk that made my blood boil. "So this is where we're staying," she said, her tone dripping with entitlement. I rose slowly, my heart pounding, but my voice calm. "No, this is where Tyler was staying. You won't be staying here at all." Her smile faltered, her grip tightening around Tyler's arm. He looked at me like I had lost my mind. "What are you talking about, Hannah? This is my home too. Nicole belongs here as much as I do." I took a step forward, my eyes locked on his. "You know that's a lie. The deed is in my name, only mine. This is my home, not yours, and certainly not hers." Nicole glanced between us, confusion hardening into suspicion. "Wait. What's she talking about? You told me this was your place, that you sold it." Tyler tried to wave her off, his voice slippery. "It's complicated, baby. I'll handle it." But I wasn't letting him spin another web. I cut in my words, sharp as glass. "It's not complicated at all. Tyler tried to sell this apartment behind my back, but he couldn't because he doesn't own it. I do. That sale is void, and what he attempted is called fraud." The word landed like a bomb. Nicole's eyes widened, her lips parting as the truth sank in. She turned on him, her voice rising. "Fraud. Are you serious, Tyler? Did you lie to me about this too? About the money?" He reached for her hand, desperation creeping into his voice. "Nicole, listen. I can fix this." She yanked her hand away, shaking her head. "No. You told me you had everything under control. You told me this was yours." I watched the cracks spread across Tyler's mask, his bravado crumbling under the weight of Nicole's fury. For years I had been the one standing in that position, confused, manipulated, doubting myself. Now it was his turn. Nicole's eyes darted to me, then back to him. Her voice was icy. "I'm not getting dragged into your mess." And just like that, she stormed out, the slam of the door echoing like a victory bell. Tyler turned back to me, panic etched across his face. "You can't do this, Hannah. You can't just take everything from me." I stood tall, my voice unwavering. "You threw it all away yourself, and now you're the one with nothing left." He slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, he looked defeated. Sometimes the universe doesn't need you to fight every battle. Sometimes the truth reveals itself, and the people who once believed the lies finally see the mask fall away. Have you ever watched someone's lies collapse under their own weight? Tell me in the comments. And if you're following this journey, make sure you subscribe, because Tyler's downfall isn't over yet, and you'll want to see the final unraveling. As Nicole's footsteps faded down the hall, I realized something powerful. I didn't have to expose him alone. His own arrogance had done the job for me. But the fight wasn't finished. The real reckoning was about to begin. The slam of the door still echoed in my ears long after Nicole left. The air in the apartment felt charged, heavy with everything unsaid. Tyler sat hunched on the couch, his face buried in his hands, the picture of defeat. For years, I had been the one sitting in silence, but now the roles had reversed. I stood at the edge of the living room, arms crossed, watching him unravel. "You lied to her," I said evenly, "the same way you lied to me for years, and now she's gone too." His head snapped up, eyes red with fury. "Don't act so smug, Hannah. You've always loved making me look bad." I shook my head. "I didn't make you look bad. You did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He leapt to his feet, towering over me like he used to, trying to intimidate me into backing down. That tactic had worked before, not anymore. I didn't flinch. "You can't just erase me," he snarled. "I've been here for 6 years. This is my life too." I held my ground. "You erased yourself the moment you picked up that phone and laughed about throwing me out. You erased yourself when you tried to sell something that didn't belong to you. You erased yourself when you chose Nicole over me." His fists clenched at his sides, his chest heaving. "You're going to regret this." The threat hung in the air, sharp as broken glass, but it didn't cut me. I had already seen the worst he could do. "The only thing I regret," I said quietly, "is wasting 6 years believing you were the man I thought you were." For the first time, his voice cracked. "We can fix this, Hannah. Please don't do this to us." I let out a bitter laugh. "Us? There is no us. There hasn't been for a long time. You just never noticed, too busy feeding your ego to see what you were destroying." He dropped back onto the couch, defeated, muttering under his breath. I walked to the table, pulled out the divorce paperwork Chloe had prepared, and set it down in front of him. "This is your last chance," I said, my voice steady. "Sign these papers, end this cleanly, or we take it to court and you'll lose even more." He stared at the folder, pale and silent. For once he had no words, no excuses, no lies to shield him. I leaned in closer, lowering my voice. "And Tyler, one more thing. If you think you can sweet-talk your way back into Nicole's life, remember what she saw tonight. She saw the truth, just like I did. You're on your own now." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the silence of intimidation. It was the silence of defeat. Right. Here's what I've learned: the moment someone who manipulates you realizes their power is gone, they crumble. And watching that crumble is not cruelty, it's justice. Have you ever had a moment where you finally saw someone's power over you dissolve? Tell me in the comments. And if you're following this journey, subscribe now, because the end of this story is where the real freedom begins. That night after Tyler left, the apartment was quiet again, but this time the silence was mine, not his, mine. The war wasn't over, but the victory was already in sight. The days after Nicole stormed out felt strangely calm. Tyler was still around, circling like a storm that refused to die, but his presence no longer rattled me. He had lost his grip, and deep down, I knew he felt it too. He tried to keep up the performance, slamming doors, pacing the apartment, muttering threats under his breath, but it wasn't working. Every attempt to provoke me fell flat against the wall I had built. He wasn't the master of the game anymore. He was a man scrambling to hold on to whatever scraps of power he had left. One evening, he cornered me in the kitchen, his voice cracked with desperation. "You can't do this, Hannah. You can't just throw me out. I have nowhere to go. I set down the glass I was holding and looked him dead in the eye. You had a home. You had me. You threw that away. Now you'll face the consequences. He flinched his eyes, darting to the stack of boxes by the door. The life he had once taken for granted, now reduced to cardboard and tape. That night Chloe called. Her tone was steady, calm, reassuring. You're in the best position possible. The buyer has dropped the deal, the fraud is documented, and the divorce paperwork is airtight. Tyler has no leverage left. It's just a matter of time now. For the first time in weeks, I let myself exhale fully. No matter how loud Tyler became, the law was on my side. Truth was on my side. But even as relief washed over me, a strange thought flickered. This wasn't only about Tyler anymore. It was about me, about the part of myself I had buried for years under his shadow. I wasn't just fighting for an apartment. I was reclaiming my dignity, my voice, my freedom. And Tyler knew it. The very next day, he stormed in again, but this time there was no rage in his eyes, only fear. He tried a softer approach, his voice trembling. Please, Hannah, don't ruin me. You know me. You know I can fix this. Don't let it end this way. I studied him for a long moment, the man I had once loved, now reduced to begging for scraps of mercy. It ended the moment you betrayed me, I said softly. All that's left now is the paperwork. He sank into the couch, defeated, his hands covering his face. And in that moment, I realized something crucial. The worst was behind me. What remained was just the unraveling, the inevitable collapse of the life he had tried to build on lies. Sometimes the scariest part of letting go is realizing you're already free. The chains aren't around you anymore. They're around the person who tried to bind you. Have you ever seen someone beg for forgiveness only after their lies were exposed? Share it in the comments. And stay with me, subscribe now, because what happens next will change everything. The final twist is closer than you think. Tyler still thought he could stall, could twist, could charm his way out. But the truth was simple. The walls were closing in, and soon there would be no escape. The morning sun streamed through the blinds when I decided it was time to end the game once and for all. Tyler had spent days spiraling, shouting, pleading, muttering excuses that even he didn't believe anymore. But I wasn't going to let this drag on. I had given him enough chances. That evening when he stumbled through the door, I was ready. On the coffee table lay a folder, neat, heavy final. He looked at it suspiciously, his eyes narrowing. What's this? He demanded. I met his gaze. The divorce paperwork. Chloe drafted it. All you have to do is sign. His face drained of color. He picked up the folder, flipped through the pages, and let out a hollow laugh. You really hate me that much? I shook my head slowly. No, Tyler. I don't hate you. I feel sorry for you. You had everything, someone who loved you, a home we built together, and you threw it all away because you couldn't see past your own ego. He slammed the folder shut and tossed it back onto the table. I'm not signing this. You can't just erase 6 years like it was nothing. I leaned forward, my voice sharp but calm. You already did that, with one phone call, with one laugh. You erased us. All I'm doing is cleaning up the mess you left behind. For a long moment, he said nothing. His jaw clenched, his fists tightened, but he didn't move. He wasn't used to this version of me, the version that didn't flinch, didn't apologize, didn't back down. Finally, he muttered, Fine, I'll sign it, but you'll regret this. I picked up the folder, slid it closer to him, and handed him a pen. No, Tyler. The only thing I regret is believing you deserved me. His hand trembled as he scribbled his name. When he shoved the pen back across the table, I felt a strange sense of release, like a chain snapping. It was done. He stood grabbing his jacket, his shoulders slumped. At the door, he turned back one last time, his voice softer now. Please, Hannah, don't let this be the end. I looked at him steady and unshaken. It already ended, the day you betrayed me. He left without another word. The click of the door closing behind him was final, like a gavel striking in a courtroom. I sat back on the couch, staring at the folder on the table. My heart pounded not with fear but with relief. It was over. The power he once held over me had dissolved into nothing. There's a moment in every battle where you realize the war is already won, that everything after is just the aftermath. Have you ever had to draw a line and say enough even when it scared you? Tell me in the comments. And if this story has you holding your breath, subscribe, now the last chapters are coming and you won't want to miss the freedom that follows. Tyler's signature on that paper wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the beginning of my life on my own terms. The day after Tyler signed the divorce papers, the apartment felt eerily different. It was as if the walls themselves exhaled, releasing years of tension I hadn't realized they were holding. For the first time in so long, I walked through each room without feeling his shadow trailing behind me. But the war wasn't fully over. There were still remnants of him scattered around the apartment, his oversized gaming chair in the corner, the gaudy coffee table he insisted on keeping, the framed jerseys that cluttered the walls. Each item was a reminder of how he had claimed space in my life, suffocating the woman I used to be. I rolled up my sleeves and started the process of reclaiming. One by one, I moved his things into boxes. Each thud of cardboard tape felt like a declaration. This is mine now. My space, my sanctuary. Lauren came over to help. She walked in with her usual energy, clapping her hands together. All right, what are we tossing first? I laughed, pointing at the chair. That monstrosity. I never want to see it again. She grinned. Good. Let's drag it out. Let the neighbors watch his throne roll down the hallway. Together we wrestled the chair through the doorway, laughing like kids. For a moment, the apartment didn't feel like a battleground anymore. It felt like a fresh start. By the end of the evening, the space looked different. Cleaner. Brighter. It was amazing how light could seep back in once the clutter was gone. I stood in the middle of the living room, breathing deeply. This was mine again, and not even Tyler's memory could take that away. That night he tried calling again. His voice in the voicemail was hollow, stripped of arrogance. I made a mistake. Can we at least talk? I didn't respond. I had wasted too many years answering him, explaining myself, defending my choices. Silence was my answer now, and silence was louder than anything I could have said. The next morning, Chloe called with an update. The fraud charges are off the table since the buyer doesn't want to pursue them, but the divorce is official. Tyler has no leverage left. It's over, Hannah. Completely over. I leaned against the counter, letting her words settle in. Over, free, done. When I hung up, I whispered the word to myself, free. It felt foreign on my tongue, but warm in my chest. That evening, Lauren brought dinner again. We sat on the couch, sipping wine, the city lights flickering through the window. She raised her glass. To freedom. To never letting someone walk all over you again. I clinked mine against hers, smiling. To freedom. And as the night unfolded, I realized something important. My victory wasn't loud. It wasn't fireworks or shouting matches. It was quiet. It was in every box I taped shut, every voicemail I ignored, every step I took to reclaim myself. Tyler had tried to break me with one cruel phone call. Instead, he had handed me the key to my own liberation. Freedom doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in cardboard boxes and quiet evenings with friends. Have you ever realized that letting go of someone was the real victory? Share your story in the comments. And if you've stayed with me this far, subscribe. Now, the final chapter is here, and it's the sweetest part of all. The chapter with Tyler was closing. What lay ahead was mine to write. The first week after Tyler walked out was a study in silence, but it wasn't the suffocating silence of his anger anymore. It was the kind that felt cleansing, like the pause after a storm when the world smells of rain and everything feels new. I woke up one morning, sunlight spilling across the bedroom floor, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the heaviness of dread pressing down on me. No anxious glance at the clock, wondering when he'd come home. No tension in my chest, bracing for the next dismissive remark. Just quiet. Just peace. I spent that week reclaiming the apartment one corner at a time. The framed jerseys were gone, replaced by artwork I loved. The gaudy coffee table he refused to part with was hauled out, leaving space for the warm oak table I had always wanted. The oversized chair he claimed as his throne, I listed it online, and the joy of watching someone else wheel it away was sweeter than I could have imagined. Lauren came by often, her laughter filling the space that had once been Tyler's domain. "It looks like you again," she said one evening, twirling slowly in the living room, like the apartment finally exhaled. She was right. It wasn't just a home anymore, it was a reflection of who I was becoming, stronger, lighter, unapologetically myself. Tyler tried reaching out a few times, his messages growing more desperate. "We had good times. Doesn't that mean anything?" Another one read, "You're going to ruin me, Hannah. Please don't do this." I didn't respond. The truth was simple. I wasn't ruining him. He had ruined himself. I was simply choosing not to go down with him. One night as I curled up on the couch with a cup of tea, I thought about that phone call, the one where he laughed as he told me I was losing everything. How certain he had sounded, how smug. And yet here I was, sitting in the very apartment he tried to steal, surrounded not by his lies, but by my freedom. He thought the story would end with me broken. Instead, it ended with him gone. I smiled to myself, whispering into the quiet I won. But it wasn't about beating Tyler. It was about winning back myself. That weekend, Lauren and I celebrated at a rooftop bar downtown. The city lights glittered like diamonds, the air warm and alive with music. She raised her glass. "Single life looks good on you." I laughed, feeling the truth of it in my bones. It's not single life, it's freedom, and I'm not wasting it. We clinked glasses, and in that moment I felt more alive than I had in years. Here's the lesson I want you to take away. Betrayal can break you, or it can build you. It can leave you shattered, or it can forge you into something stronger. If you've ever had to rise from the ashes of someone else's betrayal, share your strength in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe now, because freedom isn't just the end of one story, it's the beginning of another. As I walked home that night, the city humming around me, I realized Tyler had given me one final gift. By trying to take everything he forced me to discover, I already had all I needed: my voice, my strength, my freedom. The chapter with him was over. The story of me had only just begun.